Hi there, it's Reed from Blue Bear Quilts, and today I'm going to show you how to make a quilted pineapple ornament for your tree. I used red and green and white fabric to create these pineapple block ornaments and green and red ribbons, and on the back I used a fun Christmas print. So what are you going to need in order to make these ornaments? You're going to need a regular straight ruler. You're going to need your rotary cutter. You're going to need the Creative Grids non-slip pineapple trim tool mini. You're going to need 1.5 inch squares. You're going to need strips of red, green, and white that are 1.25 inches. You're going to need some ribbon to be able to hang your ornament. Red and green would be good. You're also going to need some backing fabric, perhaps in a pretty Christmas color, and some cotton batting. You also will need to cut your strips into the various sizes that the pattern that comes with the pineapple trim ruler says to cut. And so I've cut those out in red and green. So let's get started. So you can see that I've alternated red and green and white in the two that I've made, but for simplicity's sake of showing you how to make them, I'm going to be making them just red and white and green and white, and I'll be making two at the same time. Now the instructions that come with the pineapple trim tool mini ruler talk about how you can make these blocks in 4 inches, 5 inches, or 6 inches finished. We're going to be making a 4-inch finished. And so the first thing it says is that we need to cut 1.5 inch squares, and so that's what these two are. They are the 1.5 inch squares. And then in order to make the 4-inch block, there are 6 rounds in this, and so it says that the strip should be cut for rounds at least 1.25 inch wide. So that's what these strips are. These are all cut at 1.25 inch wide, and then this tells us how long they should be for each round. So for 1.5, for round 1 they should be 1.5, for round 2, 2 inches, round 3, 2.5, round 4, 2 3/4, round 5, 2 3/4, and round 6, 3 inches. So that is what I have subcut all of these 1.25 inch strips. I've cut all of them down to those various measurements that it said for each of the rounds. So the first thing we're going to do is round 1, which is going to be in white. And so per the instructions, those round 1 pieces are 1.25 inch strips that have been subcut to 1.5 inches. And so these are going to get sewn all the way around each of these squares. This is what they look like when they're pressed. So I sew this piece on first, then I sew the opposite piece on, and I press both of those, and you press away from the center square. And all of the pressing will be away from the center square when making these blocks. Then I put this piece on and this piece on, and then press both of them. And you can see how it's all pressed away from the center square on the back. So now the next thing we need to do is we need to square this up with the trim ruler. And on the ruler, there is a square that says round 1, and that would be this one. And this is round 1. So we want to put this square that says round 1. I don't know if you can see that, but right there it says round 1. So you want to put that square right in the center. You get those white lines so that they're lined up exactly in the center of that block. So you can see that that square is all the way around the red square. And unfortunately, you can only trim one side at a time, but so we trim that. Then we rotate it. And again, put that white square so that it's exactly in the center. And there's other lines you can look at, like this one kind of goes perpendicular to that, and there's a line here that's kind of along the bottom of that piece. So there's some other lines that you can look at to see if you're basically square. And you just go around and do all 4 sides that way. You have to be careful to make sure that you're using the one that says round 1 at this point consistently, because if you use another square, you're going to chop off the wrong pieces. And so that's what it's going to look like after round 1. And so then the next thing we have to do, now if I was alternating pieces, I would take a green piece next for round 2, but I'm actually going to keep this consistent. So I'm going to be putting red pieces on next. And they're going to be sewn around like that. And the same thing will happen with the green one. So I'll come back after I've got those pieces sewn on there. Here's what round 2 looks like. And you can see that I sewed this one and then it's opposite on first. And then I pressed these away from the center square, and then I sewed this one and this one and pressed it away from the center square. And again, you can see that on the back, everything is pressed away from the center square. So now we're on round 2. So we have to look for round 2 on the pineapple trim tool. And round 2 is located way up here. Can you see where it says round 2 right there? So with this one now, we can actually trim 2 sides at once. So I'm going to kind of angle this so that I'm able to get both sides at the same time. Which I mean actually going like that. And again, we want the black lines of round 2 to be completely within that center square. And we also can look at this line and see that it's lining up along that edge, and this one is close to lining up along that edge. So that looks pretty good. So we're going to take and trim along here. And also trim along this one. Then we're going to rotate it. And once again, put round 2 right there, that black square, inside our center square. And again, we're looking to see that this dash line and that dash line are both kind of within the white square. That looks pretty good. Trim off this side and trim off this side. And so that's what round 2 looks like once it's been done. And so then the next thing that's going to happen is round 3 is going to be white. And so we're going to put these all the way around for round 3. And if you lose track of what round you are, you can just count. So this is 1, 2, and that's 3. So now you can see that round 3 has been sewn on. So now we need to look for round 3 on the pineapple trim ruler. And you'll notice that it says right here, angle 45-degree angle trim line for rounds 3, 5, 7, and 9. So this is round 3, so we're going to be using this 45-degree angle. And in order to do that, we have to place this white line along the previous round where the red is. We have to put that right along there. Then the other thing we want to do is we want to line up this line here so that it's going right through so it's intersecting that center square. And by doing that, we will have this, and then we also want to make sure that that line comes out here in this corner as well. And when we do that, that is the proper placement to cut this. And so for this round, we're only able to do one side at a time. So again, this white line goes right along the seam for the previous red round. We want this line to be going through the center of the diamond, and we want it to go through there as well. And just go around and chop off all 4 of these. And you'll notice now that the little points are starting to get cut off a little bit, and that's perfectly okay. That's supposed to happen. So notice again, I'm lining up the 45-degree line along that previous red seam line. I'm making sure that that's within the white square, and I'm making sure that this line is intersecting the points of that triangle, and that this white line is also going through that point right there. So that's what it looks like after that round has been sewn on. Looks like I didn't quite cut that, but it'll be taken care of in the next round. So now I have to decide whether or not I want to continue with putting red around this so that it's going to be like a peppermint. Or do I maybe want to put green around it instead so that I'll have a little bit of another color. But this is how you can play around with it as you're working on it. I kind of like that. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to put the green around the red, and I'll put the red around the green. And so as soon as I've sewn those pieces on, I'll be right back. Here we are with round 4 that has now been sewn on the blocks. And I don't know if you've noticed how forgiving sewing this block together is, because not all of my seams have been sewn 100% perfect. And what makes it so forgiving is the fact that you're constantly trimming it up and getting a fresh start every time. And so that's an awesome thing, because it kind of corrects any mistakes that you're making as you go along. So once again, I sewed on this red side and then the opposite side, and then I pressed both of these away from the center square. Then I sewed this one on and this one, and again pressed away from the center square. This is round number 1, 2, 3, 4. So we now need to look for round 4 on this, and it is right here. You can see that that says round 4. So we're now going to take and place round 4, and you got to make sure you have the right one. It's this dashed line, and put that right in the center. And I'm going to be trimming 2 sides at once. So again, we're looking at lines here. So we want the center square to be completely within that dashed line. We can see that there's a black line here that's kind of lined up with that. There's a black line that's lined up with that green there. It's lined up here. So that actually looks like it's pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this up. And the nice thing about these Creative Grids rulers, they have a texture on the back of them that kind of makes it so that they don't slip too much when you're working with them. So again, I'm lining up round 4, which is this one right here. It's that dashed line right within our center square. And I'm looking at some other lines. So there's a white dashed line there and a white dashed line there. They both seem to be pretty straight with those lines. There's a black line that's lining up with this green right here. And if it continued out into there, it would line up there. So basically there's a square going around there that's basically lining up with this. And so then I'm going to go and trim these up. And there we go. So now the next thing that's going to get sewn on will be another round of white. And I'll be right back once I've sewn that. I wanted to show you something before I press this piece open. As the block starts to get bigger, these row pieces don't stretch all the way to the end. And so basically what you have to do is you have to center it in the middle of the piece. And so you just center it, and then you're going to press it open. And then as you add the next piece here, it's probably going to meet right there in the corner. It probably won't even go to the edge, and you'll see that once I bring it back. Okay, round 5 is sewn on, and you can see now that these pieces are not even touching each other or overlapping each other. You also can see that the points are definitely starting to get cut off, and that's perfectly normal. That's what's expected. So now we're going to trim up round 5. We'll double check just to make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, we look and it says right here, 45 angle trim line for rounds 3, 5, 7. So we're on 5, so we want to use this 45-degree line again. So we're going to line that up, the white line, that 45-degree line with the red. We're going to line this white line up with that intersecting the corners of our center, and also going right through the center of there. So that looks pretty good. So I'm going to trim that up, rotate it around, do the same thing. The 45-degree line goes along that red seam line. We want this white line to be intersecting the 2 points of our center square, and we want this to come out the center of that. So that looks pretty good. And you just keep doing it all the way around. So one thing about these little blocks is if you had a novelty fabric that you wanted to fussy cut, you could put some kind of a fun little figure, you know, like maybe Santa's face or a bell or a, you know, Christmas tree or something like that. If it was small enough, you might be able to fit it within that little square, and that would be kind of a fun thing that you could do with this. You also could turn these into pin cushions. I'm turning them into ornaments, but you definitely could turn it into a pin cushion as well. And that might be a nice gift for some of your sewing friends. So again, the 45-degree line is along the seam of this, the last red seam here. Then we want this white line intersecting the 2 points of our center square and coming out of the center here as well. And now I'm going to make another design decision. So I could continue around this with red if I wanted to, and have the outside be red. So it started out with a green interior and an outside red, or I could take and bring the green back again. And that's what I think I'm going to do. So I will be back after I have sewn this. Round 6 is all sewn on. And so now we need to take the trim ruler and look for the square that says round 6. And we're going to put that in the center, over the center square. And again, we're going to look for some of our lines to line up. So you can see that that's lining up with that red there, and it's lining up here, and it's lining up here and here. So that looks pretty good. And we're able to cut 2 sides with this. So we're going to cut here and over here. Then we're going to flip the block, do the same thing. We're going to line up the round 6 right on that center square. Look at these black lines and see if they're lining up around the red. It looks like they are. So we trim this and this. And our block is almost complete, but it needs some of these white corners. And so the way we go about doing that is when we look at the instructions, It says to finish 4-inch blocks, you have to trim, to finish the 4-inch block, trim the outside edge of the strips in round 6 to 3/4 using the 45-degree angle line on the ruler, placing the trim line of the ruler on the seam line of the block to make an accurate cut, trimming one side at a time, trim all 4 sides. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to take and put the 45-degree line along like this, and again we're going to make sure that this white line goes through our center square, and we're going to trim that off just a little bit. Then we're going to rotate the block and do the same thing again. Put the white line, the 45-degree line, along our red seam line. Put this white line so that it's angling through that center square, and trim this off. Again, we're going to put the 45-degree line right here. This white line is going to go through the center of that block. And trim that off. And one more 45-degree line along the red seam line, the white line intersecting the 2 points of our center square. And trim it off. So then the next thing that happens is you need a 2-inch square, and you take the 2-inch squares, and with a line on your mat, like right there, we're going to line up that edge and put that point on the line and this point down here on the line. Then we're going to take our ruler and we're going to cut from point to point. So we end up with 4 of these, and basically they're going to get sewn on each one of these corners, which is going to finish off our block. And once I've done that, I'll be right back. To sew these corners on, you just basically center the triangle in the middle of that space so that there's equal points on both sides. And also probably it would help like if that point is lined up with that point. So here are the blocks with the corners sewn on, and we use round 6 again, the square that says round 6, in order to square up the blocks. So to do that, we're going to put that round 6 square right in the center square there. And we're going to look at some other lines. We can see that this dotted line lines up there. It lines up along here. This black line lines up with that. So that looks pretty good. So we're going to trim up these 2 sides. There's 1 and there's 2. Then we'll rotate the block and put round 6 again right in the center, and we'll see that things are lined up. So that black line is lined up there, that dash line is lined up there, that's lined up along there, that black line is pretty straight along there, so that looks good. So we're going to trim up these other 2 sides. And there we go. There's our trimmed up block. And now I'm going to show you how to turn it into the ornament. Now our finished blocks are, well, not finished, but our unfinished blocks are 4.5 inches square. And so in order to make the ornament, we're going to cut background pieces and batting pieces that are 5 inches. So a 5-inch square of each. So in order to do this, you start off with putting the batting on the bottom and then putting your backing fabric with the pretty side up and your block right side down, and we're just going to kind of center it in the middle here, just like that. So we're making a quilt sandwich. The batting is on the bottom, it's a 5-inch square. The backing piece is right side up, it's a 5-inch square, and the unfinished block, which is 4.5 inches, is laid right side down on top of the backing fabric, and it's centered in the block. Now we need our ribbon, so I'm just going to measure like what a hook would look like, or when it makes a hoop, what it would look like. And then cut the extra off. And don't make the same mistake I made. I put it in like this before and then end up cutting it off when I turned it right side out. So it has to go in like this, and it actually goes in between these two pieces. So you put this like this and that like that, and then you can pin that all in place. And then what you're going to do is you're going to sew with the edge of your presser foot so that the 1/4 inch is actually sewing on top of your pineapple block. So you're going to sew a 1/4 inch all the way along here, but you need to leave an opening in order to turn this. And this is kind of going to be hard to turn, so you need to leave a pretty big opening. So I basically would start here, go around, and stop right here so that you have plenty of room to turn. And I'll show you that in a second. So I sewed all the way around, a 1/4 inch in from the edge of the block, and I left an opening right here. And you want to leave a fairly big opening so that you're able to turn this. And once you've sewn all the way around and left that opening, the next thing you do is you trim it up. You trim off the excess, trim off this excess backing and batting so that it's even with the edge of the block. And then you take and you cut off the corners, and you cut basically right up to where this stitch line and this stitch line intersect, but be careful not to go beyond that. And you do that on all 4 corners, and then you're going to turn this right side out. This is the ornament turned right side out. You can see I put that beautiful Christmas backing fabric on it. And so in order to get the points poked out, the thing that can be helpful is this tool, which is called a Purple Thang. It has like kind of a square end on it, and then it also has a curved point end. And so you can just stick it in the opening and kind of poke around in those points. Not too hard, because you don't want to poke through the seam. Just go and poke carefully in those corners, trying to get them nice and sharp as you can. And then once you're satisfied you have those points, you're going to take this backing and batting and fold it down and iron it flat. And then you're going to take this top piece and fold it in about a 1/4 inch and iron that nice and flat. And once you get that all ironed nice and flat, you're going to just take and stitch 1/4 inch all the way around the outside of the ornament. You also could do quilting inside the ornament if you wanted to as well. So here's the ornament when it's been stitched around the outside. It's all complete and ready to hang on your tree. It also would be a nice thing to put on packages as a decoration, or you might want to make these for people and give them as gifts. If you like this content and you like this video, please be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, be sure to hit that bell so that you'll be notified anytime we post a new video. We've got an exciting announcement that's coming up in January with a fabric company, and we can't wait to share it with you. So please go to our website at www.bluebearquilts.com and sign up for our newsletter so that you'll be sure to hear that announcement when it happens. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.